Right, so hello and welcome everyone to Open Finance in the Middle East. I'm Dylan Sham, the head of content at the Open Mind Project, and I will be your moderator today. This webinar will be exploring some of the intricacies of open finance, considering both the international experiences and local context in the Middle East, with a chance to zoom in on an example from the Kingdom of Jordan. We'll tackle some common challenges and technical hurdles, and overall provide some recommendations for the financial services sector. So, joining me today, I have three experts in their respective fields. Firstly, we have Abdullah Al Toikat, Solutions Architect and Head of Development at the Jordan's Payments and Clearing Company, also known as JOPAC, an organization that develops payment systems, making sure they're up to international standards, and that has also launched an incubator for FinTech companies in their growth stage. Next up, we have Bara Al Bashairi. She is the senior specialist for the FinTech office at the Central Bank of Jordan. Now, Bara was part of the committee that drafted the recent open finance instructions published at the end of 22, so we can expect some insight from her. And last but not least, we have Simon Redfern, the CEO of Tasobe and founder of the Open Mic Project. Now, Simon was among the first to start pushing for open APIs in banking almost 13 years ago now, building the first open banking standard and contributing to several initiatives around the world. So, without further ado, let's start with the basics and make sure everyone is on the same page. So, let's get into some quick definitions. What is open banking? Open banking is a movement and a common banking practice that involves exposing technical interfaces to enable customers to securely share their data with third-party providers in order to access innovative fintech services. Now, some examples of these services are personal finance management apps, account aggregation, and alternative lending apps, for example. Now, open finance is the extension of open banking to include other areas of finance such as investments, savings, asset management, wealth management, etc. Now, these both contribute to the trend that is open data, which goes on to include other industries, telco, utilities, but that's another story. Now, open banking regulations mandate that banks must share this data, and we've been seeing a sharp increase in initiatives and frameworks since 2020. Now, not all open finance regulations are created the same. They vary by region, depending on the local context and the specific objectives. So whether you're trying to increase competition in the banking sector or increase financial inclusion for consumers. Um, so open banking first entered the Middle East in 2020 and has been adopted by several countries. Even the countries that haven't adopted regulation are launching regulatory sandboxes to facilitate fintech testing. So let's analyze the current status of these regulations in the Middle East. Simon, considering your conversations with regulators and the research you carry out at the SOBE, could you provide a brief overview?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan, for the intro so far. So I guess in the region, Bahrain was the first mover, starting, I think, in around 2018. And then, more recently, Saudi Arabia with SAMA. They have started in around 2021. There are other countries in the region, and then of course we have Jordan with their open finance starting more recently. Is there another slide for this, Dylan, that we can skip to? Yeah, so here we see that there are a range of approaches, right? This kind of regime type is interesting. Commander, architect, and diplomat approaches, and commander is really the regulators saying to the banks, you must do exactly this. And architect is saying we're not going to tell you how to do it, but we tell you what we want to achieve. And diplomat is basically leaving it much more to the market and kind of supporting. Most of these standards are using a kind of mixture of UK PSD2 with some influence from Australia peeking in there. They all share a common kind of architecture, which is REST, adopted by Open Bank Project back in 2011, as you said, 2010, 2011. And they have, each area is like focusing on slightly different use cases, which is suitable for their country and situation, and that's to be welcomed. Yeah, that's a quick overview.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. That's great. So we have the chance now to zoom in for a moment on the open finance instruction in Jordan. Now, Bara, what was the motivation behind this? Why has the central bank decided to launch the open finance framework in Jordan?
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure today to participate in this interesting webinar. As we all know, regulating any topics, including open finance, is a debate, and it considers within the financial security, financial industry, and regulatory bodies. Because finding the right balance between innovation and enhancing financial services and regulation is crucial. Over-regulation can stifle innovation and prevent the full potential of open finance, for example, from being realized, and under-regulation can expose users to risks and harm. So we must have a kind of a debate, and we must have encourage innovation beside caring about risk. So as the financial sector ecosystem continues to evolve, the regulators and the industry stakeholders need to work together to develop appropriate and effective regulatory frameworks and instructions. So in Jordan, we have launched the Open Finance initiatives to enhance the financial services and customer experience in the financial sector in Jordan. Also to align with the development in open banking or open finance field around the world. Also to align with the Jordan Economic Modernization Vision that was held in 2022, because one of its priorities, it relates to the financial sector in Jordan, is to provide an appropriate environment for fintech and innovation, positioning Jordan to become a leading regional hub and investment destination for fintech, as well as promoting it, transforming into a digital cashless society using effective and innovative and new digital financial services, including the open finance services. So to achieve this priority in the Jordan Economic Modernization Vision, enabling open finance in the kingdom was necessary to enable fintech and third-party providers company to provide new and innovative financial services. So this have been achieved in the instructions by mandating banks and PSPs to open their APIs and get them ready for the open finance services, and so providing open finance services in the financial sector.
Right, thank you, Bara. So what is actually in the framework? Because what would you say are the main pillars of this of the instructions that you've published?
Actually, it's the framework is in a shape of instructions. So there is a mandate in these instructions. So they are open finance instructions, and the provisions of these instructions, they apply to all banks and PSPs, or in another words, electronic payment and money transfer companies that are licensed in the kingdom. The instruction contains many pillars and many topics, including the mandate for the banks and payment service providers to allow the third-party provider to access their customer data after taking their consent via the API technology to provide new services to the customer in the financial sector in Jordan. The data type that can be shared the third-party provider can access any type of customer's account data, including customers' data, transactions data, account data, any information about the account data also. The third-party provider can be, but it's not limited to, the account information service provider that just read the customer data and use it to provide new services, or it can be a payment initiation service provider, which initiate payments from customer account or can send a request to pay. This is also included in the instructions. Also, the instructions have many technical and security requirements for the API. They are general requirements. Nothing is defined specifically, or no standard is defined specifically in these instructions. So the banks and PSPs are asked to define and document their standards, which are necessary for providing the open finance services. Based on best practices in this field. So it's left to the banks and PSPs to determine the standards. Governance, there are also governance requirements. So they are asked the banks and PSPs to define the responsibilities of the boards and the executive managers regarding the open finance services that they want to provide. Also, they are asked to have an open finance policy. They must establish an open finance policy. This is committed to establish so that it is documented and approved and covers all security elements related to open finance services and what can be shared, how they can contract with the third-party provider. All of this can be put in this policy. Also, there's risk management requirements. As I told you in the first question, we must make a balance between we want to enhance financial and open finance services, and also we want to keep caring about the risk management. So we have risk management requirements in our instructions. So the banks and PSPs are asked to identify, manage, and monitor any risk that may result from contracting with a third-party provider and from providing the open finance services. Also, we have requirements about data privacy and data protection, about consumer protection requirements, about also the third-party provider requirements. So the bank and PSPs are asked to have adequate due diligence procedures to identify the identity of the third-party providers in accordance with the risks and that may result from these services in an appropriate way and in accordance with these instructions. Also, these instructions take into account how to deal with the third-party provider and how to contract with it.
Okay, and what about for the future? So we know that various open banking frameworks tend to expand, right, going forward because they are in continuous evolution. Do you already have ideas of where the direction would be?
Yes, we are in the phase of studying our future. Issuing these instructions is not the end. It was the first stage and the first step for the open finance initiatives in Jordan. We are thinking about encouraging to define a unified API standard. We can collaborate with the private sector. To make it easier for the fintechs to access any customers, banks, and PSPs and payment companies. So instead of preparing themselves to every API at every banks and at every PSP, they can the unified API will be much easier for them. So the instructions doesn't forbidding this. So we are looking forward to collaborate with the private sector to define, to have a unified API standards. In addition, many financial institutions can provide financial services other than the ones we have defined in the instructions. So we will extend the open finance ecosystem to include more data and account holders such as insurance companies, microfinance companies, exchange companies, to include the rest of the financial services that can be included in the financial sector. So we look about to extend not just the banks and the PSPs.
Right, thank you very much for that. Okay, so each country has obviously decided on very different routes to ensuring interoperability. As you said, Jordan has its own kind of program. In Europe as well, PSD2 didn't mandate a specific standard, which is why the market came up with the different standards such as Berlin Group and STET in France. In the Middle East, as Simon has mentioned before, we've been seeing mostly a commander approach and thus a mandatory standard issued by the regulator, such as in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So, Simon, based on your experiences in other countries, what is the difference between regulators issuing standards and the market developing their own? There must be some pros and cons. Can you give us some considerations about that?
Yeah. So I would say that from a developer perspective, developers would prefer to have unified standard, right? So and I think the reason that non unified standards emerged is basically, so if you look at PSD2, it's very general about the how, right? It doesn't even mention the word API in the whole of their 70 page document or whatever. And this is probably because it's a result of a committee, right? A large committee of many banks. And Berlin Group is the same, right? So Berlin Group is an actual standard, but it's actually more of a kind of framework than a standard. So there are many ways, many different ways to implement payments, for instance. And again, that's a kind of committee. And even the UK standard was defined by a committee, right? But from a developer's perspective, they would prefer to see a simple standard because, just guess what? It's just a lot less work if you don't have to modify your connector code to connect to different banks. But the flip side is that if banks have their own choice, then then they can choose what's most convenient for them. Maybe they have a vendor that works with a certain standard, or so, and so on and so forth. I would say that whatever route is chosen, for me, one of the most important things is just to have super open documentation, right? So that not behind a paywall, not behind a login screen. So it's amazing. Like you look at when you're looking around at countries which are just producing their open finance or open banking framework. Sometimes it's just not easy to find the open API file, the Swagger file, and this is what developers want to see. So don't hide that behind. Make it clear. It's amazing sometimes, because obviously lots of money goes into these projects, and then for some reason the open API or Swagger file is just not there, or you can't get access to it. So I think that in a sense that's almost more important than anything else, because if you have a good open API file, you can automate quite a lot of the connectivity and so on. And the other thing is is all the security aspects, of course, but we'll come on to that a bit later, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I actually wanted to pull Abdallah in to the conversation finally. So Jopak knows about standards in financial services. So I wanted to hear more or less the same question. What are some considerations for developing standards in the sector in Jordan?
Hello, everyone, and thanks a lot for having me here today. As Simon said, mostly the developers usually their preference actually towards the industrial, a specific standard to work with to minimize the development efforts and all of that. So our starting point actually was the legal and regulatory alignment. So based on our regulations here in Jordan, as Barat mentioned, the Central Bank of Jordan left it to the industry and the market to take the specifications to the market. For that, we have created our task force. Then it will take us to the industry collaboration just to understand the needs of the market and the relevance and with the clear objectives for what we are trying to create and what are the objectives that we are trying to achieve. In addition to the global perspective, so we have to align with the existing specifications globally and the compatibility with the Jordanian already existing infrastructure for payments and accounts. So the factors to implement the standards here in Jordan was various and was started with the regulations, collaboration with the market, and research for global implementations. And from there, we take it to the objectives and relevance with the current infrastructure here in Jordan. Consistency and compatibility with inclusivity for especially because here in Jordan, our regulations is towards open finance, not only banking industry or the banks, limited to the banks. So we have defined the inclusion criteria, the participant stakeholders here in Jordan, PSPs, money transfer companies, and all the stakeholders, what we want to include, or the needed services to be compliant with the regulations here in Jordan.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Abdullah. Actually, I'll come back to you in a little bit because I have another question. So this will require a joint effort from the financial sector, at least regulated institutions, to ensure interoperability and also that the market doesn't become fragmented due to incompatible standards, right, or differing standards. But this is just one of the many challenges, I suppose, involved in open banking. So I wanted to hear a bit about the other challenges, maybe not just from a technical perspective. So Simon, can you tell us a bit about the main challenges, so the common challenges that you've seen kind of around the globe across jurisdictions involved with open banking implementation?
Sure, Dylan. I think maybe go to the next slide. Yeah, so I think there are different domains, right? So if we start from the right-hand side, there are, like when open banking or open finance comes to a bank or a country, everyone is involved, right? So the legal departments of the banks and institutions, the regulators are involved. There's PR, so press relations. You think, why PR? Well, because customers are now kind of asked to at least think about giving their data to other providers, right? And this has to be done in a kind of careful way, in a kind of smart way, especially if there is some resistance from the banks, right? We saw that in the UK when open banking started. So that there has to be some like positive communication and explanation of what's going on. And then to get everybody on board, there has to be, good commercial sense, right? So this means like identifying and talking about use cases and just making sure that it's a kind of win-win-win situation. So I would put that all kind of under the banner of confidence in a sense. Then culture and skills, that kind of touches some of the confidence thing, but there's lots of new terms to be learned and lots of skills. So upskilling, in some of the banks and so on and so forth. Then if we just think about the technical side, it's like there's a lot to be done in terms of integration. So we have these new API systems which are connecting to back-end systems. And, the back-end systems might have quite specific modes of operation, let's say that. And then suddenly there's this whole kind of hungry consumers on the outside. They want to eat this data, and they want it now and now and now. They want it again and again and again. So there are challenges there to do with providing the proper infrastructure and making sure performance is good. And then there are just like user interface questions, right? How do you onboard customers so that they can be authenticated properly, and so on and so forth. And then, in a sense, this all leads into the ecosystem, right? Which is the kind of the whole point of open banking or open finance regime, right? The regulator wants to see more competition, more quality, leading to a kind of a healthier financial system, in the country or the region. And it's really a virtuous cycle, right? So if there are customers who are happy using these new applications, that makes the fintechs happy. If the customers are happy, the banks are happy, then they'll produce more APIs, right? So it's really really a cycle. So there's lots to be to get right. To we've seen in some other jurisdictions, even though you have open banking regulation, you can take a dog, you can take a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make it drink. So there's, you have to get a lot right. And part of this is the onboarding. And we see with how regulations have evolved, for instance, in UK, and now with PSD 3, there's a definite emphasis on making the consent process easy and so on. Yeah.
Right, and these are kind of some of the general challenges that are common in every country. However, we all know that challenges may vary by jurisdiction. So, what implementation challenges can we expect in Jordan, for example? Are there any challenges specific to the local landscape, Bara?
Yes, the challenges that we have faced regarding open finance instructions, regarding implementing the open finance services, the open finance ecosystem, is like any challenges that any country face. As Simon mentioned, we have all the challenges that Simon has mentioned, but specifically because any initiatives regarding emerging technology and new financial services in the financial sector will face many challenges especially in the early stage of the initiative. So one of our implementation challenges is the culture of banks and PSPs in Jordan. They still have don't this knowledge and this culture about the open finance services, about having banks to accept to allow the third-party provider access their APIs and access their customer data. So we have still lack in this culture and in this knowledge, and like in expecting the banks and PSP to expect this. So it's a new trend in the Jordanian market. So we have this challenge. So the banks and the PSP must recognize the open finance services benefits and how it can enhance the whole financial sector in Jordan. So they must permit the fintechs and the third-party providers to access the customers' data. So this will give them an opportunity to improve their services regarding the customers. So they must have this culture. Also, another challenge is that many banks and PSP, even if they expect this culture, they don't have the right knowledge, the right experience how to prepare their API to this new type of services, how to act, how to prepare their infrastructure. So they have lack of experience in this regard. Also, banks and PSP may find it difficult for them to decide whether this incoming third-party provider will be trusted or not. How can I study the risk of these services, the risk of having the third-party provider accessing my customer data? So these are the main challenges in Jordan.
Right, and so you mentioned a lot about this new kind of bank and TPP interaction. So we're gonna say something about that, but before we wanted to just a second go through some of the more technical challenges. Um, so Simon, this is some of the security elements of open banking. Just to give like an overview and kind of demystify the whole technical side, right, from kind of this. Yeah, so if you could go ahead there.
Yeah, I'm not sure this diagram is going to demystify. It's a bit early in the morning for that. But basically what this diagram is showing, actually it's referring to something that Bara was saying earlier, which is about basically identifying the app, you know. So this is what this whole kind of to this diagram with this arrow going to the right and the left. So in general, these types of diagrams, they show the arrow. The arrow shows which thing is initiating the request. So at the top, we have the top left, we have the app. The arrow coming out of that is because it's initiating HTTP request to the server, to the API server, and then the data is flowing back the other way. And so everybody knows probably about HTTPS, right? So this is in all web browsers and so on and so forth, and it just makes sure that the browser, once it starts communicating with a website, whether it's Google or eBay or whatever, it continues communicating with that, right? So you don't want the browser to suddenly find itself communicating with a hacked website or something, and that's what these HTTP certificates are about. And open banking just adopted a kind of more strict approach of that, which was already in existence, but open banking and open finance has adopted this, and it's called mutual TLS. And it just means that not only the server has to have a certificate, but the app has to have a certificate. And so the app is identifying itself. It's like the app showing its passport to the server, as well as the server showing its passport to the app. And then within that, the app is kind of signing the information it sends. So if it says, okay, I want to send $20 here, then it signs that with its certificate so that the server knows that that's really what the app wanted to do. And similarly, the response is signed by the server. So this is just part of the kind of authentication and authorization journey. Another part of it, which is this, so previously we were talking about the app and the server, and now we're really talking about the customer. The customer has to give their consent to the third party, so that so basically the customer can't sue the bank for giving its data away. So this process starts with privacy in mind, right? So as the process starts, the user is not authenticated, and only once the the user starts to give their initiates the consent, then they get authenticated, and the application ends up with some kind of consent token, which it can then use to get the data on behalf of the customer. And the principles here are really starts anonymous. There should be strong customer authentication involved, so SCA, and you should be able to revoke the consent. And PSD2 talks about exemptions, right? So you shouldn't have to go through some SCA process if you want to pay a parking meter or something like that. But this really is one of the cruxes or the important points of this whole journey. The less friction you can have here, the better your open banking or finance experience will be. And this is one of the things which is really been iterated on over the years. So once endpoints get there, of course, new endpoints are added and so on. But once you have an endpoint, you can pretty much keep it there. But this security consent experience is important, and actually it's a bit wishy-washy as well in some of the standards, because it. But a lot of this can be explained with API endpoints in terms of what needs to be stored and so on and so forth. But actually this process is not generally explained using endpoints, and I think that's something that could be improved in standards, actually, because endpoints are good at describing a data flow process. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, so that's the technical side of this, right? But another important side is this new kind of friendship between banks and fintechs. So we mentioned a bit about fintech sector growth and this collaboration, and fintechs have their own challenges, right? It's new for them as well. So Abdullah, you're working with fintechs. You might know something more. So what challenges do these fintechs actually face?
Actually, from what we have seen, I can split the challenges into two different parts. The first part is related to the market directly. So if the market have the regulations to enforce the open banking, open finance, that would make it easier for the fintechs to partnership with the banks and make the banks have the need to be compliant with the regulations. On the other hand, we have the specifications. So if we have standard specifications in the country, and for the fintech to come prepared for the bank, that also would it make it easier for the fintechs to collaborate with larger number of banks in the same country. On the second half, we can talk about the regulatory compliance. So the banks are very conservative once dealing with any third-party provider, where the third-party provider must be compliant with the local regulations and the global standards and recommendations from regulatory bodies. So the banks love the TPPs or the third-party providers to have that knowledge and be compliant with such regulatory bodies. Lack of trust, because most of the banks usually love to work with already known vendors from a technical perspective, even the value-added services for their customers. So the startups need to work on that. Cybersecurity and data privacy, this is one of the major topics. So for the TPP to be compliant with all cybersecurity recommendations and guidelines, data privacy guidelines, that will give the fintech a better collaboration chances in the markets they are working with. So it depends on the implementation on the countries, the targeted audience for the fintech, and the extra knowledge that TPPs must have in the banking industry to add values for the banking customers and to enhance the services for them. So we'll give them a better chance to collaborate with the banks in the targeted area.
Right, and what So on the incumbent side, what can incumbents do to actually, because they're going to have to collaborate, right? So what can incumbents do to adapt kind of to this to fintech companies and basically form partnerships that are worth it?
A lot can be done from the TPPs and third-party providers to start with open communication and collaboration culture. Just to do that, and here in Jordan we have with blessing of Central Bank of Jordan and their efforts, we have, as you said in the beginning, we have created our Jordan Open Finance Incubator for the startups, especially specialized in the fintech industry, just to open all the communication channels and the collaboration culture between the banks and the TPPs, and to try to give them that experience of being open to the new startups here in Jordan for the fintech innovation and flexibility, just to keep updating with all technologies, make it easier and enhance the services for the customers of the banks and the financial market stakeholders. Regulatory expertise that would also enhance the establish stronger partnerships between them. Incubators and accelerators, as I said, we have started our own incubator, and we hope to reach the acceleration point to give the startups the chance to have a good look over the banking industry here in Jordan and the financial market here in Jordan. Risk management that would a lot help the TPPs to establish also a strong partnerships with them. As the banks, as I said, one of the challenges actually is a lack of trust. So to come with a good risk management and controls for the banks that would give the banks the confidence to start working with the third-party providers and the fintech companies here in Jordan.
Right. And of course, the question that kind of arises automatically is, why should they? So of course, it's required, but why would incumbents want to form partnerships? What are the benefits? I don't know, Abdullah, if you would like to try that out, or maybe Simon. I'll leave that kind of to the floor.
Well,
I
yeah,
guess
maybe
Simon. Yep.
yeah, maybe I can say something about that. So, yeah, you know, as Abdullah was saying, you know, the banks can be conservative, you know, and in a sense they need to be, right, to keep their systems and their data safe and all the rest of it. But because they're maybe conservative, and obviously this depends, this can be different from bank to bank, right? So some banks are built, if we look in Brazil or in the UK, some banks are built, you know, from scratch to be very modern and digital and so on and so forth. But if you're not a modern digital bank to start with, then you probably don't have the culture or skills in-house necessarily. But you can start building that, right? You can start. You can learn a lot by working with fintechs, and we sometimes advise that banks, you know, partner, if not invest in fintechs, you know, because that's a good way to bring new ideas and you know, skills in house. I mean, you know, if we talk about what's happening, you know, what are the current trends, you know, across the world? You know, obviously we have climate change, we have the AI and so on, you know, and it's likely that people who are interested in this stuff are, you know, maybe not working, you know, in the bank at the moment. So working with partners is a good way to get access to these ideas, to these new approaches, like agile approaches. I know that's really important at JOPAC, for instance, and so on. So yeah, I think there's many good reasons to partner, you know, and but you know, fintechs also need to be wary of it. There was a joke like back in the day, like a FinTech had a problem. They didn't have any banking customers, and then they've got a customer. Okay, now they've got two problems, because there's often this difference of speed, right? So the FinTech can maybe move faster than the bank, and so on and so forth. But I think it can be a win-win for sure. Yeah.
Right. So aside from, of course, being able to adopt technology quicker without the need to build in-house, there are some benefits from the business perspective. So also expanding your customer base and being able to reach customers that were previously too far or too risky, for example. But there are also considerations to make in the area of monetization, because transformation does come at a cost, right? And incumbents would like to know if they can recover those costs often. Some regulations don't allow for commercialization, but as we've seen, the trend is going towards providing the right type of compensation for setting up these technical interfaces. Um, but you mentioned actually, yeah. So you mentioned about Jordan, that kind of it's left up to the market, right? There's no specific guidelines in terms of fees, right? But there are
In
some.
terms of yes.
Yeah, no, sorry. Do you have a comment for that?
Yes, in terms of fees, our model in our regulation, the fees can be paid from the customer, from the financial institution. So it depends on the business model itself. But we have put in our instructions for the Central Bank of Jordan the rights that they, for example, in future or in the coming days, the central bank have the rights to decide and define the limits for these fees. But we didn't until now define any limits.
Right. So, and Simon, perhaps you can tell me a bit about some models that we've seen around the world for revenue, right? So there are different models and how they want to charge for APIs and data use. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, for instance, PSD2 specifies that the FIs must give a certain number of accesses per day, but if you want to get access more frequently, then that can be charged for. Obviously, banks can add premium APIs, so just extra APIs which are not covered by the by the regulation. So the regulation generally says that banks have to provide APIs which provide the same quality as their kind of existing services. But that in terms of out of the kind of regulated space, you can provide, you can charge for APIs on a rate limited basis. So you can provide, X calls per hour, day, week, month, whatever. You can provide subscription fees and so on and so forth. So there's many ways. It's like data is is just a service, right? So you can charge for it. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And that can actually help make sure that the technical interfaces are actually up to standards, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so we're almost at the end. Before we move to the Q&A, I saw there was one question on the chat already. If you want to start writing your questions in the chat, then you're welcome to. So our speakers do have some recommendations for you, quite different from one another. Of course, we're all quite different here as in the panel. So I'm going to let your speakers kind of tell you for themselves. So we'd start with Abdullah. with your recommendation?
Yeah, for my recommendation, actually for startups, because Jordan is newly regulated country in the open banking, open finance field, and the already drafted regulation is more than a guidelines with very generic rules to be implemented. So all startups must have the agility and keep adapting the and working with the development of the regulations here in Jordan and the specifications, as this is a continuous development process and might need some time to reach the maturity level and the stability from a regulation perspective and specifications perspective. So to have that agility, prioritization of the data and the operational security for it, and keep updating and moving forward with the regulations and the specifications here in Jordan to achieve their goals and keep up for the changes.
Great, thank you, Abdullah.
Thank you.
So on the other side, we have Baral's recommendation, which is more coming from a regulatory authority, right? So a bit of tough love there. Bara, could you go ahead?
Yes, I just want to have a message to all the audience, and we always say this message to our financial sector, that the regulator is here to support and is here to help innovation, to help enhancing financial services, enhancing the whole financial sector in Jordan. We are not here just to have instructions and to restrict the banks and the PSPs and the financial institution in the market. So the open finance instruction was here to force, not just to force, to encourage, let me say it in another word, to encourage the banks and PSPs to provide and enhance the services that they provide to their customers. So our main objective was to encourage them, not just to restrict them. So we recommend them to be ready to provide the new open finance services and be ready to open their APIs to the third-party provider. So we want everyone in the financial sector and in this every stakeholder in the financial sector to benefit from the emerging technologies, including the open finance. So we want the fintech to benefit from this technology, this trend. We want the banks and PSP to benefit from it. So this is my message. We are here to support, not just to restrict the technologies and the services.
Thank you very much, Bara. And lastly, Simon, you have a couple short, you have like a handful of short recommendations.
Short. Okay, I'll take your hint, Dylan. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be cool, and I don't know if there's any initiative like this going on, but to have passporting within the different countries in the Middle East, right? So the regulators could get together and talk to each other and see if, so in PSD2 in Europe, right, if you get regulated by the German central bank as a TPP, then you can take this certificate and go to Spain or France or any other European country, right? And that's even if you have different standards, like slightly different RESTful API standards, that really helps, right? Because you just have to tick all your boxes in your home country, or you choose a country that you want to be regulated in, and then you can go to other countries and get data and use services. So maybe that could be really cool for the Middle East, right? To get a broader ecosystem going there. Then in general, yeah, I think, I would recommend that, even a choice of standards is good to make the developer access easier. As we talked about earlier, make the consent process easy, because you need this virtuous cycle. one thing that is, I'll repeat again, make sure your open APIs, I mean, there's a reason for the word open, right? In open banking and open finance, there's a really, that first word, open, make your documentation open, right? Make it very obvious and easy to find. And last but not least, think about your country, the year, it's 2023 coming on 2024, and what's happening, right? So I think actually central banks, can play, I mean, obviously they do play a big role. And I think with climate change, they can play actually a bigger role. So I've been reading an academic paper about this global 4C, which is like a currency for carbon sequestration. So Bara, I would encourage you to have a read about this, search for global 4C, because that's a major challenge we need to face and do something about. And I think financial services will need to play their part in it. Think to the future, which is very soon. Actually, it's now. And now.
Great, thank you, Simon. So these are the messages from our experts to you. I hope they provide some material for thought. So I guess we can move on to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, then feel free to write them in the chat. If you have any comments, you can also write them in the chat. You don't have to ask questions, and that's it. So there was one question from before that I noticed, and the question was, user data, would it be held with the bank or service providers? And will the open finance company be acting as a third-party data processor? So I think this is very specific, so it's most likely for Bara, for the open finance instructions in Jordan.
Okay, about the data. The data itself belongs to the customer, which have an account in the PSP or account in the bank. So the third-party provider is the data user, and the bank and the PSP is the data holder. So for the data holder to allow the data user to use the data, it must have the consent from the customer. Did I answer the question?
I hope so. So I think they will tell us if the question is unanswered. Thanks. There's also another question here. Are there any tips you would give to European open banking fintechs that want to make their entry into the MENA region? Who wants to have a go at that?
Maybe I can try. As we have seen here in Jordan, we are seeing a lot of third-party providers coming from the EU region to the MENA region, let's say, just to have a knowledge in the regulations, as we have some differences from the EU region than the MENA region, and understanding the financial landscape and the stakeholders in the financial market, that would help a lot, actually. And to be honest, the banks here in the MENA region are open to collaborate and work with third-party providers, especially for their customers' benefits and the value-added services for them. So I highly recommend to start penetrating the market here in the MENA region.
Abdullah, can I ask a question about that? I mean, is the JOPAC incubator, is it open to making contacts from EU fintechs and stuff? I mean, is that part of your role? Or?
And that's and we are actually currently working on a challenge for TPPs for a specific use cases and problem statements directed to the already existing, let's say, corporates and startups to solve those challenges, just to show them the Jordanian market and give them a chance to and introduce the market to them and give them the chance to have channels here in Jordan. And this is how we are trying to involve more parties or other startups globally to be here in Jordan.
Oh yeah, this is what we started talking about when I was with you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Right, and is there any difference like with if the startups are coming from the UK, because we know they're not part of Europe? Is there any difference in that at all?
I believe it's still the same case from globally. Let's say, as Simon said, this is the whole idea is about openness and opening the market and the benefiting from the current infrastructure, the banks and service providers to give the customers value-added services. So I believe it would be the same actually, even even if we are talking about different legislations and regulations, but I believe it would be the same.
Right. Okay. So I hope those questions were answered. If you have other questions, we still have well, we're a bit over, but I guess we have 2 minutes if you want to ask some questions. And our speakers, if you also have other comments, then feel free. We're getting asked if you can share the contact information of the incubator. So we'll share all the links as well to Jopak's incubator and all the links we mentioned during the presentation via email.
Yes, I just want to add, can I add something?
Yes, feel free, yeah.
Hello? I just want to add about if startups or fintechs or third-party provider want to come from outside the MENA region or outside Jordan, our main and national, not just the central bank objective, also our national objective is to attract investments in Jordan. So we are welcome to those startups and those fintechs and those third-party providers. And in Central Bank of Jordan, our main objectives in enabling fintechs and enhancing financial services, including the open finance services, we attract investors and start up to come here and implement their solution here in Jordan. And one of our initiatives to achieve that we have a regulated sandbox at the Central Bank of Jordan. So if their solutions meet the requirements and the criteria of our regulated sandbox, they can try and test their solutions in our regulated sandbox. Our regulated sandbox is a tool that make them ease for them to enter the market. So instead of entering the market directly, they can try their solutions in a limited environment in the regulated sandbox. So if they require any contact information regarding the FinTech office, regarding the regulated sandbox, all on our website, on the Central Bank of Jordan website, on the page financial technology and innovation page.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Bara, and we'll.
I'd just like to say I'm going to be in Palestine on the 13th of September, so I'll be in the region next month. Yeah. Please reach out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to catch up with Simon as well, we can share the Simon's LinkedIn as well. So that would make for interesting conversation. We'll also share the link that Bara was mentioning and all the information related to that. So speakers, do we have any other comments on your side, or are we kind of happy? Okay, thank you, Simon, for sharing that.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so if we don't have any more questions, I thank everyone for joining, first of all. So is that another question? Okay, no, perfect. So we're all saying thanks. So a big thank you to our speakers for being excellent. And an even bigger thank you to the audience. These sessions are quite important, as is collaborating with other parties in the industry, working together to tackle challenges and expanding our horizons and such. So thank you. I look forward to seeing you again at another session where perhaps we'll dive into the details of Bahrain or Saudi Arabia frameworks. When you close the session, you will see a survey asking for your thoughts. We would be highly appreciative if you could share what you thought of the session and some feedback and what you'd like to see in the future. So a big thank you to everyone, and we'll see you all soon.
Great. Thanks, folks.